What happens when two of television's most respected and recognizable personalities collide in a heated, unexpected exchange that changes the atmosphere of daytime TV in an instant? Today, we're diving deep into the explosive confrontation that sent shockwaves through the entertainment world and left millions of viewers stunned, confused, and eager to know what really went down. Before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments below, because trust me, you are not going to believe the behind-the-scenes drama that unfolded during this unforgettable on-air moment. It was supposed to be an ordinary day at the studio of The View, but from the very beginning, something in the air felt different. The studio lights were blazing hot, brighter than usual, casting sharp reflections across the polished table where the host sat. The audience was buzzing with excitement, anticipating a pleasant and inspiring interview. On that morning, Robin Roberts, the highly respected Good Morning America anchor, walked onto the set with the calm confidence of someone who had spent decades mastering the world of broadcast journalism. Robin had always been known for her grace under pressure, whether reporting from disaster zones, navigating personal health struggles, or moderating breaking news with composure. She had earned the admiration of millions. Her reputation was built on integrity, sincerity, and professionalism. But even with all her experience, nothing could have prepared her for what was about to unfold during that segment, a conversation that would take an unexpected turn and become one of the most talked-about moments in daytime television. As the show began, Whoopi Goldberg greeted Robin with genuine warmth. "Robin, it's so wonderful to have you here," she said, her voice full of affection and respect. The audience burst into applause, thrilled to see Robin seated at the famous table. Robin smiled gracefully and nodded at the familiar faces around her. "Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here with you all," she replied, radiating her signature warmth that instantly put guests and audiences at ease. The conversation flowed as smoothly as anyone could hope for. They talked about Robin's latest projects, touching on her continued success at GMA and her evolving role in the world of storytelling. They reflected on some of her most memorable interviews, her philosophy on journalism, and how she maintained authenticity in a media landscape that was changing by the minute. Naturally, the hosts also brought up her well-known personal journey, the challenges she had faced, and the strength she had shown through her health battles. The audience listened closely, clearly connected to every word. The energy in the room was positive, supportive, and uplifting. Everything looked like it was going exactly according to plan. But then, suddenly and without warning, the tone shifted. Joy Behar, known for her boldness and sharp, often unpredictable commentary, leaned forward with a look that immediately caught the attention of the viewers and even the co-hosts. "Robin, I have to ask you about something," Joy began. Her tone dropped from friendly curiosity to something more pointed, more confrontational. The change was subtle but unmistakable, and the room seemed to tighten around her words. Robin, ever calm, turned slightly toward Joy, prepared to respond to whatever direction the conversation might take, or so she thought. "There's been a lot of talk lately," Joy continued, "about journalistic integrity and whether morning show hosts are really journalists or if they're just entertainers." The words hung in the air like a sudden gust of cold wind. The audience shifted in their seats. The other co-hosts exchanged quick glances, clearly caught off guard by the abrupt pivot. Even Whoopi raised her eyebrows slightly, sensing the tension rising. Robin blinked, maintaining her composure, but the unexpected nature of the question hit hard. It wasn't a casual inquiry, it was a challenge to her profession, her identity, and her entire career. Joy leaned back, waiting. Robin took a slow breath, gathering her thoughts. This wasn't the typical light morning show banter. This was a confrontation, and everyone in the room could feel it. There was a reason Robin Roberts had become one of the most respected journalists in America. She knew how to remain steady, even when the ground beneath her began to shake. But the question Joy posed wasn't just about Robin, it touched the entire industry. It questioned whether morning news hosts who mix hard journalism with lifestyle content still counted as true reporters. Robin lifted her chin slightly, ready to respond with the same dignity and strength that had defined her entire career. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every micro expression, every shift of energy, every silent second. This was no longer just an interview. It was a moment of truth. The audience in the studio and later, millions watching online, could sense that this exchange was about to become one of those rare live TV moments that people would talk about for years. The atmosphere was charged, the tension nearly electric, and all eyes were locked on Robin as she prepared to speak. What came next would not only surprise the viewers, but would also spark debates across social media, entertainment news outlets, and journalism circles everywhere. This was more than a disagreement. It was the collision of two powerful voices, two philosophies, two interpretations of what it means to be a journalist in the modern world. And it was only the beginning. The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon, its weight settling over the studio with an intensity that immediately changed everything. For a split second, Robin's confident smile weakened. It wasn't gone completely. She was far too seasoned, far too disciplined to let a single expression betray her true feelings, but the shift was there, subtle yet unmistakable to anyone who knew her. Still, she forced herself to stay composed, maintaining the polished professionalism that had defined her entire career. "Well, Joy," Robin began, her tone controlled and even, "I think that's an interesting question. I've always believed that good journalism can be both informative and engaging." She paused, choosing her words with the precision of someone who understood the power of every syllable spoken on live television. The audience leaned forward, sensing the tension just beneath the surface. Robin was trying to keep the conversation civil, but Joy had no intention of letting the matter rest so easily. "But don't you think there's a difference?" Joy pressed, the edge in her voice sharpening. It was the kind of tone that didn't just ask a question, it pushed, prodded, and demanded. Her words caused a ripple of discomfort around the table. Several of the co-hosts shifted in their seats, their expressions tightening. Even the normally unflappable Whoopi glanced sideways, as if silently questioning what direction Joy was taking this in. Joy continued, unwilling to let the moment soften. "I mean, when you're doing those feel-good segments and celebrity interviews," she said, leaning forward as if preparing to deliver a blow. "Are you really practicing journalism, or are you just playing a character?" The studio fell completely silent, not the usual quiet between conversations. Not the smooth transition silence of a talk show. This was the kind of silence that felt heavy, the kind that made the air itself seem thick, as though the entire room was waiting for something to erupt. Even the production crew sensed the shift. A camera operator hesitated mid-movement. A stage manager out of frame froze with her hand still raised to signal the next cue. The control room, watching through monitors, was filled with stunned faces. Something was unfolding that none of them had expected. For the first time, viewers witnessed something new in Robin's eyes, something that had never been seen by audiences who had followed her for years. It was subtle, a flicker, but it was there. Hurt, confusion, and a growing anger rising beneath her normally calm exterior. She blinked slowly, steadying herself. "Joy," Robin said, her voice low and carefully measured. "I'm not sure I understand what you're implying." Her tone was polite, but the tension beneath it was unmistakable, like a taut string pulled just to the brink of snapping. "I'm not implying anything." Joy shot back immediately, as though she'd been waiting for that exact line. She straightened her posture, leaning even farther in, her elbows pressing onto the table with purpose. "I'm asking directly." She paused just long enough to let the moment tighten before continuing. "Do you consider yourself a real journalist, Robin?" she asked, her voice cutting through the studio like cold steel. "Or are you more of a television personality who happens to read the news?" A soft gasp came from somewhere in the audience. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Others simply stared, eyes wide, unable to believe what they were witnessing live. At the table, the co-hosts exchanged nervous glances. Sarah's eyebrows lifted in concern. Whoopi shifted in her seat, her hand inching toward Robin as if preparing to step in. Sunny Hostin cleared her throat lightly, an attempt or perhaps a plea to interrupt before things escalated even further. But Joy wasn't finished, not even close. The atmosphere in the studio had transformed. Moments earlier, it had been warm, energetic, filled with supportive applause and friendly conversation. Now it felt suffocating, the tension thick enough to sense through the screen. Even viewers at home could feel it, the kind of uncomfortable energy that made people sink deeper into their couches, too stunned to look away. Robin inhaled deeply. Her jaw tightened just for a moment, a tiny movement almost invisible unless you were watching closely. She was deciding how to respond, whether to defend herself, deflect, confront Joy, or maintain her usual grace. But whatever she chose, one thing was clear: this was no longer just a disagreement. This was personal. The cameras zoomed in slightly, capturing the intensity in both women's eyes. The director didn't cut, didn't switch topics, didn't signal a commercial. He knew this was a moment, one that would trend, be replayed, dissected, and discussed everywhere. Robin finally spoke, her voice steady, but laced with emotion she could no longer hide. The edges were sharper now, her calm composure starting to crack under the pressure of Joy's relentless questioning. Before she could continue, Joy opened her mouth again, her expression a mix of determination and defiance, but the other co-hosts were finally ready to intervene. They shifted forward, raised their hands slightly, prepared to speak anything to calm the escalating confrontation, spiraling right in front of them. Yet no one truly knew what was coming next, because the moment was no longer about a question. It was about pride, it was about identity, it was about two strong television icons clashing live on air in a way no one had expected. And for everyone watching in the studio or at home, it felt like the tension was reaching a point of no return. "You know what, Joy?" Robin said finally, her voice still controlled but now carrying a sharp, unmistakable edge. It was the first sign that the calm, collected anchor was reaching her limit. "I've covered hurricanes, I've interviewed presidents, I've reported from war zones, and I've broken major news stories over the course of my career. My journalism credentials speak for themselves." Her words were strong, composed, and rooted in decades of real experience. But the moment they left her mouth, Joy scoffed loudly, a scoff so dramatic, so dismissive, that it would soon be replayed endlessly online. "Oh, please," Joy said, rolling her eyes with such exaggerated contempt that several audience members visibly flinched. This eye roll would become infamous in the coming hours, a symbol of the confrontation that no one saw coming. "Anyone can stand in front of a camera during a hurricane," Joy continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That doesn't make you Edward R. Murrow." The comparison wasn't just sharp, it was calculated. Edward R. Murrow was one of the most legendary journalists in American history. Invoking his name in this context was like throwing gasoline on an already growing fire. Everyone in the studio knew exactly what Joy was doing, and the tension spiked instantly. Robin's face flushed, a deep red rising in her cheeks. For a moment, she looked like she might fire back instantly, but she caught herself. She inhaled deeply, forcing her emotions back under control. She was fighting to maintain her professionalism, even as the interview shifted from uncomfortable to openly hostile. "Joy," Robin said quietly, her voice still steady but undeniably strained, "I'm not sure why you're being so confrontational." She paused, tightening her grip on the edge of the table. "We're supposed to be having a friendly conversation here." Joy blinked, then tilted her head in mock confusion. "I'm not being confrontational," she replied, her tone coated in false innocence, but her posture leaned forward, shoulders tight, eyes unblinking, told a very different story. "I'm just asking the tough questions that other people are afraid to ask. Isn't that what real journalists do?" The irony of her statement wasn't lost on anyone, not the studio audience, not the viewers at home, not even the co-hosts sitting at the table. It was almost surreal. Joy Behar, a comedian, entertainer, daytime personality, positioning herself as the arbiter of journalistic integrity, while attacking someone who had spent decades reporting from the front lines of real events. Robin let out a slow breath, steadying herself. "You're absolutely right that real journalists ask tough questions," she said, though her voice wavered ever so slightly. Her composure, though still intact, was beginning to show cracks. "But there's a difference between asking tough questions and being deliberately disrespectful to a guest." Joy laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that seemed to slice through the room. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't casual, it was belittling. "Oh, so now asking about your qualifications is disrespectful?" Joy mocked, her eyebrows arching. "That's interesting. Coming from someone who supposedly values journalistic integrity." Her tone was poisonous, cold, sarcastic, dripping with accusation. The tension in the studio grew so strong it felt almost physical. The temperature in the room seemed to rise. The air felt heavier. The energy was thick and uncomfortable, as if everyone was holding their breath. The audience had gone completely silent. Not a cough, not a rustle, not even a nervous laugh. People sat frozen, unsure whether they were watching a real interview or an unfolding disaster. The other co-hosts looked like they wanted to disappear. Sunny Hostin stared at the table, her jaw tight, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Sarah's eyes darted nervously from Robin to Joy, silently pleading for someone to intervene before things escalated further. Even Whoopi Goldberg, usually the calm anchor of the panel, seemed caught between shock and frustration. Her body slightly angled away from Joy, as if trying to distance herself from the confrontation. Every camera in the studio captured the moment as it spiraled. Every viewer, watching at home, could feel the tension building through their screens. And social media, though unaware yet, would soon explode with reactions, debates, and millions of opinions on who was right and who had crossed the line. Joy leaned back slightly, crossing her arms in a way that communicated both victory and stubbornness. Robin, meanwhile, inhaled deeply again, trying to recenter herself. Her voice, when she spoke next, carried the weight of someone who had already been pushed far past what she had expected that morning. "I value journalism," Robin said, her voice low but firm. "Real journalism, the kind that informs, educates, and uplifts people. But belittling someone's career on live television isn't journalism, Joy." Joy raised one eyebrow, unimpressed. "I'm not belittling you. I'm asking questions, but everyone knew better. Everyone saw what was really happening." Robin's gaze sharpened. Her calm was slipping, not because she wasn't strong, but because she had been blindsided in a place where she expected respect, not ridicule. Behind them, the crew exchanged alarmed looks. Producers whispered to each other urgently through headsets. Someone in the control room muttered, "This is getting out of hand," while another whispered back, "Don't cut to commercial, not yet." Because whether they admitted it or not, the network knew, this moment was going to be huge. The confrontation had crossed a line. The conversation was no longer an interview. It was a clash, raw, unfiltered, emotional. And it was clear to everyone watching that things were only going to escalate from here. Whoopi could sense that the situation was spiraling out of control. The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a knife, and the audience's uneasy silence only amplified the growing sense of danger in the air. So finally, she leaned forward, raising her hand slightly and speaking with the calm authority that had made her a legend in television. "Joy, I think we should move on to something else," Whoopi said firmly. But Joy wasn't ready to let anything go. She wasn't finished, not by a long shot. "No," Joy insisted, shaking her head. "I think this is important. The viewers deserve to know whether the people delivering their news are qualified to do so." The temperature in the studio seemed to spike. Robin's jaw tightened ever so slightly. She'd been trying to keep her composure, trying to stay professional, but Joy's relentless prodding was pushing her closer and closer to the breaking point. "And what exactly makes you qualified to determine that?" Robin asked quietly. Her voice wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but the quiet intensity behind it sent a chill through the studio. It was the kind of tone that let everyone know a line had been crossed and there was no going back. Joy's eyes narrowed, a glint of something cold and deliberate flashing behind them. It was clear she had been building toward this moment, pushing Robin step by step, waiting for her to crack. And now she looked ready to deliver what she clearly believed would be her knockout blow. "Well," Joy said slowly, leaning in with a self-satisfied smirk, "unlike some people, I don't pretend to be something I'm not." The words hit with surgical precision, sharp, cutting, intentional, and they landed exactly where Joy wanted them to. Robin's composure, which had been stretched thin for several agonizing minutes, finally snapped, not in an explosive, chaotic way, but in a controlled, focused, devastating way. Her eyes blazed with a fiery intensity that no one, not the audience, not the co-hosts, not even Robin's millions of fans had ever seen before. This wasn't the warm, calm, steady Robin Roberts the world knew. This was the woman who had faced down Category 5 hurricanes, who had sat across from presidents, who had reported from war zones, who had stared death in the face during her health battles and survived. "Pretend to be something I'm not," Robin repeated slowly, each word landing like a warning shot. Her voice had dropped to an almost frighteningly quiet level, the kind of quiet that signals a storm is about to hit. "Joy, let me tell you exactly what I am." A hush fell over the studio. You could hear the hum of the lights. You could almost hear viewers at home holding their breath. "I'm someone who has earned every single thing I have," Robin continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Through hard work, through dedication, through actual journalistic experience." She leaned forward slightly, her presence suddenly filling the room, "and I haven't had to insult other people's careers on national television to prove it." The studio was so silent that even the cameras seemed to zoom in on instinct, drawn to the moment as if they understood they were capturing something that would replay on news channels, social media, and talk shows for days, maybe weeks. Joy blinked, clearly stunned by Robin's sudden shift in energy. She hadn't expected this. She'd thought Robin would stay calm, stay soft, stay composed. She hadn't expected a counterpunch, not one like this. "Robin, I didn't mean to suggest," Joy began, attempting to soften her tone, but her attempt came too late. "No," Robin cut in sharply, her voice rising with controlled fury. "You did mean to suggest it. You meant to sit here on national television and question my credentials, while positioning yourself as some kind of authority on journalism." Joy opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For once, the quick-witted comedian had no comeback. "So let's talk about qualifications, shall we?" Robin said, her voice crisp, powerful, commanding. The other co-hosts sat frozen, their eyes wide, unsure whether to intervene or let the moment unfold. They looked like people trapped between two crashing waves, unable to move, unable to speak, waiting for the impact. The audience remained completely silent. No whispering, no shifting, no murmuring, just stunned, breathless disbelief. They were witnessing something unprecedented in daytime television. Robin Roberts, normally the embodiment of calm professionalism, unleashing decades of lived experience, frustration, and pride. "I started my career as a sports reporter during a time when women weren't even welcome in locker rooms," Robin continued, her voice ringing with strength. "I had to fight for every interview, fight for every story, fight just to be taken seriously." She wasn't reading from a script. She wasn't performing. She was telling the truth, and it shook the room. "I covered the Gulf War," Robin said, her eyes locked onto Joy's. "I reported from the field. I put myself in danger. I stood in front of real crises, not just studio lights." The weight of her words crushed the remaining air out of the room. The energy shifted entirely. Joy's earlier smugness dissolved, replaced by a stunned, almost defensive stillness. Robin continued, and each sentence was a blow, a challenge, a declaration. "I've broken national stories that changed lives. I've interviewed survivors, victims, heroes, world leaders. I didn't sit behind a desk and throw opinions at people. I went out there and did the work." Her voice intensified, rising like a wave. "So don't you ever sit across from me and imply that I pretend to be something I'm not." The room shook with silence. No one dared to breathe, because they all knew this wasn't just an argument. This was a reckoning. This was Robin Roberts reminding the world and Joy Behar exactly who she was.